What if the version of awakening you were taught was never the whole truth? Not because awakening isn't real, it is, but because what you've been shown is a highlight reel and no one prepared you for what comes after. The confusion, the emotional crashes, the relationships that quietly fall away, the feeling that something is wrong with you, even though something feels deeply right. In a few minutes, I'm going to explain what's actually happening when this begins and why these painful parts aren't a mistake. They're part of the process. But first, let me tell you about the morning that I realized I hadn't been failing at awakening. I'd been believing the wrong story. It was 3:03 a.m. again. Another night of waking up with downloads I didn't understand. Another night of questioning if I was losing my mind or finally finding it. I've been going through another phase of my awakening process for months, reading all the books, following all the teachers, doing all the practices, and I felt worse. More anxious, more disconnected, more alone. Everyone online was talking about their high vibe life, their quantum leaps, their instant manifestations. Everything was so wonderful. And there I was, sitting on my bedroom floor, crying in the dark, wondering why my awakening looked nothing like theirs. I felt like I was failing at something I didn't even understand. But here's what I didn't know then. I wasn't failing. I was just following the wrong map. The map that says awakening should feel peaceful, blissful, easy. The map that skips over the part where everything you thought you knew gets stripped away. That morning, sitting in the dark, I stopped trying to awaken the right way, and I started trusting my internal feeling of what was actually happening and what was right. Here's what nobody tells you. The spiritual awakening you see online is not awakening. It's spiritual bypassing with better marketing. Take a second for that to sink in, because that's exactly what it is. You're getting fed a lot of marketing bull that has been out there for so long. Real awakening does not start with bliss. It starts when your comfort ends, when the life you built suddenly feels too small for who you are becoming, when you can't pretend anymore. Let me break down what is actually happening when you do begin to awaken. Because once you understand this, everything makes sense. Social media has convinced us that awakening happens in a moment. One meditation, one ayahuasca ceremony, one guru's teaching, and suddenly enlightenment. But that's not how consciousness works. Awakening is not an event, it is an unfolding. It's your soul remembering who it's always been, piece by piece, layer by layer. And here is the hard part. Each layer you remember means letting go of something you thought was you. I'll show you exactly what I mean in just a moment. But first, you need to understand why this process feels so devastating sometimes. When people talk about ascension symptoms, the fatigue, the dizziness, the emotional overwhelm, they make it sound mystical. But here's what's actually happening. Your nervous system is recalibrating. For years, maybe decades, you've been running on a frequency that isn't yours. Living according to beliefs you did not choose, following a script written by family, culture, and fear. When awakening begins, your body starts rejecting that frequency. That's why you feel sick, tired, emotionally raw. You're not ascending to some higher dimension, you're descending back into your truth. And your body is processing years of disconnection. This isn't punishment, it's purification. Remember when I said each layer you remember means letting go of something you thought was you? Here's what I mean by that. Awakening is an identity death. You're not just gaining new insight, you're losing the person you thought you had to be. That good girl who never says no, the achiever who measures worth by productivity, the people pleaser who abandons herself to keep others comfortable. Every spiritual tradition talks about the death of the ego and the dark night of the soul, but online, they skip showing that part. They show you the after photo, the woman who's aligned, in flow, living with purpose. They don't show you the months that she spent not knowing who she was anymore, the grief of losing relationships that only worked when she was small, the terror of building a life from scratch with no map. That's the real awakening, not the Instagram version, the one that happens at 3 a.m. when no one else is watching. But here's what changed everything for me. The moment I stopped trying to make my awakening look like theirs was the moment the next phase actually began. Because awakening isn't about becoming someone new, it's about becoming real. Stripping away everything that isn't you until all that's left is truth. And yes, that process is painful, but it's also the most honest thing you'll ever do. So if you're in the middle of this right now, if your awakening doesn't look like the highlight reel on Instagram, if you're tired, confused, grieving, questioning instead, let me offer you something. A practice I wish someone had given me. I call it the truth check-in, and it only takes about 60 seconds to do. So no excuses about not having enough time. You're simply going to place your hand on your heart. You're going to take a slow breath in, and you're going to let it out. And while you're doing this, you're going to ask yourself, what am I trying to force that isn't ready? What old identity am I still clinging to? What truth am I afraid to admit? Now that's a tough one, because a lot of the truths that we really need to hear are the truths that we avoid hearing. So really think on that one. What truth am I afraid to admit? And don't rush the answers. Let your body show you the tension in your jaw, the knot in your stomach, the heaviness in your chest. Those are all clues, and that is your awakening speaking, not in words, in sensation. This is how you navigate it, not by following someone else's map, but by learning to read your own body's truth. So, let me say it again. Spiritual awakening, as it's sold to you, is a lie. Not because awakening isn't real, but because the version you've been shown is sanitized, packaged, made palatable. The real awakening, it's messy, it's lonely, it's painful, but it's also the most liberating thing that will ever happen to you. Because on the other side of that ego death, you don't find enlightenment. You find yourself. The version of you that was always there underneath all the conditioning. The one who knows her truth without needing external validation. The one who trusts the whispers even when they lead her away from everything familiar. That version of you, she was never broken. She was just buried. And awakening is the excavation. Most of the spiritual advice that you're following, the stuff that sounds so good, so enlightened, it's actually keeping you stuck. You're not doing it wrong. You're just following the wrong map, just like I was. And I'm going to show you a different way that may align with you a little bit more. So until then, remember this. Your awakening doesn't have to look like someone else's. It just has to be true. It has to be you. Sending you much love, and until we meet again, many blessings to you and yours. Bye-bye for now.